Boruto's blood was boiling while the colossal chakra tore through the dark sky and announced the end of everything. This terrifying sight was impossible in the eyes of any ninja who knew our village's history, because the monstrous silhouette now casting shadows over the smoking rubble belonged to a legend that had already taken its last breath, proving that the rules of life and death had just been brutally rewritten right in front of you, throwing all logic out the window in a single terrifying instant. To understand how we reached this level of absolute despair, you need to rewind a few hours, back when the final defenses crumbled like paper against the ruthless advance of the Shinjus, leaving our protagonist completely cornered, his lungs burning from exhaustion and carrying the bitter certainty that conventional brute force would no longer be enough to guarantee tomorrow, demanding a radical and completely suicidal solution. With nowhere left to run and carrying the weight of the entire world's survival on his shoulders, the young man channeled his last sparks of energy to shake off the enemy trackers, diving deep into the darkest forests of the Land of Fire until he found the forgotten old ruins of his family's original clan temple. A place bathed in extremely dark legends, isolated from civilization and covered in thick layers of ancient dust. Ignoring the basic survival instincts screaming at him to turn back immediately, Boruto pushed his way through the crumbled stones and found the sacred central altar. Fully aware that the spell locked within those walls demanded indescribable physical pain as payment, literally claiming a vital piece of the soul of anyone who dared to break the ancestral seal. An incredibly high price he was perfectly willing to pay with his own body. Without hesitating for a single second, he plunged a rusty blade into the palm of his own hand and smeared his boiling blood over the runes faded by unforgiving time, triggering the forbidden blood ritual with a muffled scream of absurd agony, feeling every nerve in his body collapse while the reddish lines glowed sinisterly on the stone floor, greedily draining his vitality. The ancient ground began to shake in an absurdly violent way as the boy's chakra signature expanded aggressively into the underworld, forcing a dangerous spiritual bridge and shattering the dogmatic barriers of the impossible until an immense wave of infernal heat exploded from within his own chest, revealing to the world that the dormant essence of Kurama was answering the desperate blood call of its new host. The fusion process was something visually grotesque and divinely terrifying at the same time, as the ancestral energy of the Nine Tails crashed head-on against the absolute darkness of the karma rooted in the boy, generating a massive vortex of dark and red chakra that completely obliterated the temple's pillars and began to violently rewrite the young ninja's cells, brutally merging the limits of human power with bestial instinct. But paying close attention to the details, you will soon realize that this was not the same wise and serene creature that fought amicably alongside the 7th Hokage in the past, because the imperfect resurrection brought back a corrupted manifestation of pure fury and vengeance, a beast thirsty for pure destruction that immediately began poisoning the heir's mind, whispering dark promises of absolute death against all his enemies. Outside that hellscape of stones, the terrifying adversaries finally tracked the immense energy explosion and surrounded the giant crater that had formed, only to be suddenly swallowed by a suffocating aura that melted the very ground beneath them, forcing the relentless villains to step back out of pure biological survival instinct, realizing far too late that they had cornered the worst possible monster on that bloody night. With his eyes burning intensely in a glowing golden hue and his face slowly covered by grotesque animalistic marks, Boruto lifted his head to face the black horizon, feeling the poisonous chakra cloak wrap around his shoulders while the fox's twisted smile tore across his own human face, clearly revealing that the real mortal battle would not be against the monsters outside, but against the immense demon now fighting to seize absolute control of his mind. The initial impact of the clash caused the very atmosphere around the shattered temple to enter total collapse, while Boruto shot into the darkness like a blood-soaked meteor, leaving a trail of purple flames that melted the ground beneath his feet with every frantic step, showing you that the profane fusion between karma and the fox's power was creating a terrifying anomaly in the very gravity of that battlefield. Facing this monstrous and brutally irrational assault was Hidari, the terrifying clone born from the divine tree bearing Sasuke Uchiha's ice-cold face, watching his former apprentices approach with a robotic and calculating coldness until being forced to push his Sharingan to its absolute limit just to try and track the absurd speed of a flame-cloaked punch that completely obliterated the forest behind him. The collision between the two titans generated a deafening shockwave that would make any elite ninja instantly lose their hearing, mixing the sound of the enemy's dark thunder with the bestial roars of an out-of-control fox, proving to you that the scale of that fight had completely surpassed the barriers of what we consider human, rapidly escalating into a direct clash between true gods of destruction in an absolutely desolate landscape. But while the exchanged blows destroyed the geography of that place and tore gigantic craters in the damp earth, a macabre detail began to unfold inside our hero's body in total silence, because the divine fury of Two Tails was not a gentle or remotely balanced power, acting as a radioactive poison that mercilessly burned Boruto's chakra networks and turned his own blood into a boiling and deadly substance. Every time he forced the release of more red energy to deflect the sharp lightning blades fired by the emotionless adversary, you could notice the boy's skin cracking like shattered glass and revealing a terrifying light beneath his open wounds, clearly indicating that his biological vessel was miserably failing to contain the crushing magnitude of that ancient force being forcibly fused with the alien Karma technology. Ignoring the crippling pain that turned his bones to dust and blinded his vision due to the dripping sweat and blood, Boruto channeled all the beast's insanity into a single incredibly concentrated strike in his right hand, manifesting a massive and unstable Rasengan that mixed the violent rotation of wind with the absurd density of a tailed beast bomb, creating a vortex of absolute annihilation that sucked in even the light around its chaotic and vibrating sphere. This battering ram of corrupted energy hit Hidari's chest with surgical and extremely devastating precision, dragging the impassive villain for several miles of scorched earth, while the resulting explosion formed a gigantic pillar of red light that tore through the dark clouds of the gloomy night, making it seem for a brief and glorious split second that the Uzumaki heir's immeasurable physical sacrifice had finally secured the village's survival. However, the dust had barely begun to settle when Boruto's body abruptly caved to the weight of his own incredibly destructive and uncontrollable power, making the boy drop to his knees on the charred ground and vomit an alarming amount of pitch-black blood, while the karma marks on his face glowed in a sickly blue hue and desperately tried to reject the parasitic and oppressive presence of the furious fox that stubbornly refused to back down. It was exactly in this instant of extreme vulnerability and purely indescribable pain that the worst possible nightmare materialized and froze your blood completely watching the scene unfold, because from the middle of the thick smoke storm rose Hidari's haunting figure, with practically half of his body completely disintegrated, revealing that the living wood of the divine tree was already regenerating rapidly and healing the mortal wounds with a terrifying biological efficiency, without showing even a drop of pain or any kind of apparent human reaction in the face of near death. The clone raised his remaining hand toward the sky and molded a colossal black lightning storm that swallowed all the remaining hope in that ash-stained killing field, prepping his final mercy strike against the young ninja who could not even move a single trembling muscle to defend himself from the impending slaughter. And right when the dark lightning descended from the heavens to pierce the protagonist's vulnerable chest and end this tragic story in a totally premature and definitive way, a third, infinitely more sinister presence awakened very violently in the depths of Boruto's fractured consciousness, tearing the silence of the night with a macabre and echoing laugh that instantly paralyzed the clone's attack, revealing with an insane smile that Momoshiki had just seized total control of the boy to prevent the loss of his precious vessel once and for all. Momoshiki's echoing laugh took over the desolate battlefield as he reveled in the boy's absolute vulnerability, taking command of that broken body and tasting the metallic flavor of imminent victory, certain that he now possessed not only a perfect vessel ready for the slaughter, but also the immeasurable chakra of the ancient beast that boiled uncontrollably beneath his pale and corrupted skin. The parasitic god raised his blood-soaked hand with divine arrogance and snapped his fingers in a theatrical and mocking way, making the electric storm conjured by Hidari dissipate into thin air like a mere harmless breeze, showing you the colossal and terrifying difference between a clone born from the divine tree and a true celestial being who now held absolute control over all the power concentrated in the destroyed arena. But it was exactly at the peak of his sadistic and grotesque celebration that Momoshiki's smile suddenly froze on his disfigured face, because an excruciating and completely unexpected burning sensation began to sprout from the center of his pale chest, making the arrogant invader choke on his own breath as he realized, with pure terror piercing his spine, that the intense red chakra was not submitting to his mental commands whatsoever. It was in this instant of lethal confusion that Kurama's deep and ancestral voice echoed not only in Boruto's fragmented mind, but directly into the invader's parasitic soul, revealing the massive plot twist that would alter the course of everything, confessing with a tone of deep irony that the bloody ritual in the ruins never had the real intention of sacrificing the young Uzumaki's life, as we were all desperately led to believe. The legendary fox meticulously explained that he needed to push Boruto to the absolute limit of brutal pain and insurmountable physical exhaustion just to force Momoshiki out of his cowardly hiding spot and take control of the vessel, creating the only strategically possible window of opportunity to trap the god's consciousness in a tangible plane, completely vulnerable to the purifying fire that boiled inside the veins of the divine beast, thirsty for righteous retribution. Without giving the slightest chance for reaction or spiritual escape to the enemy who was now entering full-blown panic, Kurama initiated his ultimate sacrifice in a masterful and indescribably beautiful way, fusing his own flaming vital essence directly into the corrupted DNA chains of the blue karma, igniting the dark geometric marks with a golden and redeeming flame that began to erase Momoshiki's parasitic existence from the inside out without any mercy. The invaders' shrill screams of agony echoed through the cold night like a terrible nightmare rapidly unraveling before the light of the impending dawn, while Boruto caught his breath and his own clear consciousness, feeling the ancient tormentor be obliterated down to the last cursed cell of his dark existence, letting the boy watch in silent shock as the immense fox's familiar presence said a honorable and warm goodbye, to guarantee the absolute future of the ninja world. When the absurdly blinding flash finally vanished from the ruined field, and the karma marks faded definitively and forever from the protagonist's skin, Hidari tried to take advantage of that brief moment of transition and absolute shock to launch a sneaky and fatal attack, firing a highly concentrated lightning blade straight at the neck of the young man who now looked like just an ordinary human, stripped of any mystical mark to protect him from the imminent impact. However, our protagonist simply raised his serene and focused gaze to the startled clone and deflected the mortal attack with a simple and casual hand movement coated in pure and overwhelming chakra, proving to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that Kurama's dramatic purification did not just destroy the internal threat forever, but also perfectly refined all the boy's latent power and instantly transformed him into the first human god in shinobi history. With a single devastating step forward that shattered the very fabric of space and air around him through the sheer pressure of his absolute strength, the hero, finally free of all his cruel chains, delivered a clean and definitive strike that completely disintegrated Hidari in a fraction of a second, reducing the monster to mere harmless ashes scattered by the night wind, ending the threat of that dark night once and for all, and ensuring that the Uzumaki's unshakable legacy would live on bright and strong. If you felt the tension of this epic battle and got chills with this absolute outcome of pure overcoming, drop your like right now and hit that red subscribe button so you do not miss the next exclusive stories I am intensely preparing for you, remembering that there is already another amazing video on the channel waiting for your click right at this very moment, and I guarantee you will not regret it. I will see you next time, and a big hug.